Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest stories in MMA. On this week's docket, the return of The Ultimate Fighter 31 with coaches Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler. Speaking of, the notorious one will give you the latest on his possible long-awaited return. Jon Jones versus Tyson Fury. Yeah, Dana White weighs in on that and much, much more. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Gorgeous George, and with me, as always, some of the sharpest MMA minds in the biz. Joining me this week, the MMA Titan, Media Titan, joins us from Toronto. It's Mike Bond. Down in Miami, Florida, Danny Segura is back from Colombia. Glad to have him back. And, of course, Farah Hanoun, our overseas standout reporter. She is in Cairo, Egypt. Cold coffee's on the ones and twos. Let's get to it. The Ultimate Fighter 31 aired its first episode this past Tuesday with head coaches Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler leading teams of prospects and veterans, respectively. This is expected to be a big season for the long-time reality show. For months, it was asked, will you be tuning in? Well, did you? How did you think episode 1 came off? And are you here for the whole season? And guys, I know it's your job, so don't give me that line. I just want to know maybe more as a fan. What did you think? And then you can give some critique as a media member. We're going to go to the MMA Media Titan, Mike Bond, first.
It's so hard to put myself in the shoes of a fan, George. I know that's what you try to want me to do here, but I've covered almost every season of this show for the last 10 plus years. I wrote so many recaps. And when I watched this, the thing that instantly hit me was it looks the exact same basically as almost all the previous seasons, right? The same cutscenes, the same B-roll, the same format of the episode. It was just no surprises really came with it. The way they selected teams was a little bit different in terms of dividing up the veterans and the prospects. But other than that, it was the same old Ultimate Fighter. And there honestly wasn't as much of Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler and their interactions in there as I thought there would be and hoped there would be. Because obviously we can cut it however way we want. People are tuning into this for Conor McGregor. He is the star of the show. We want to see how he's acting, how he's coaching, how he deals with Michael Chandler. And we didn't get a whole ton of that. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more coming, but yeah, I did watch it, not live. It took me a couple days till after the fact to tune in, but I made sure, of course, to take my time to check it out. But it's not something that made me desperate to continue tuning into these episodes the rest of the season. I'll do it if I have time. I'm sure you'll see certain clips and things like that pop up, but to me, there was no fresh coat of paint that makes me feel damn, this is the Ultimate Fighter 31. They, made some big changes. Now I need to see it.
I like that. The fresh coat of paint line. I might use that one. Mike, I remember when Bader and Brendan Schaub, the guys that have already retired from the sport or are close to, Bader, by the way, on Chandler's team, they were actually blogging for us. So you're right. There hasn't been too much of a difference in what's been presented.
We even have someone blogging for us, Kurt Hollabaugh, who I think is going to be working with Nolan King. That was some interesting insight.
Oh,
we
cool.
got make sure you follow up on MMA Junkie each week. I think after every episode, Nolan and Kurt are going to be kind of recapping what happened there.
I liked it. I read it from top to bottom. That was awesome. Shout out to those guys. All right, Danny Segura, how about you? What was your position on this?
Yeah, typical old Ultimate Fighter, right? Same footage as Mike mentioned, same sort of style that they shoot it in, same storylines, really, rough background, looking to make a better life through the Ultimate Fighter and getting into the UFC and whatnot. Obviously, new wrinkles here with McGregor and Chandler and how they pick the teams and whatnot. I did notice, and I hadn't watched the Ultimate Fighter in quite a while, but I did notice they get to the fights fairly quickly. It just seems, even when they picked the teams and they showed the B-roll and the interactions in the house, it was very limited, very short. So I wonder, I think that's just an adjustment maybe to the times now that people just like fast-paced stuff, kind of the TikTok era where the attention span is much shorter. So that's good for the UFC. Other than that, I mean, the show has gone on for so long that at this point, it just kind of just feels like an equation, and then you just plug in new variables every time, but it just feels like, repetition. It just feels very repetitive. So I haven't been a huge fan of the Ultimate Fighter for quite a while. I think there's an audience for it because they keep doing it. The McGregor interest will draw some new fans or some older fans looking to reconnect. But all in all, I wasn't blown away. This is a fantastic show. Again, maybe I'm a bit desensitized and burnt out from just the countless of series that I've watched from the Ultimate Fighter. But it was all right. It was all right, I guess.
All right. Well, I thought the reaction would be a little bit more positive, maybe because I think McGregor's such a star, and he seems to resonate well with the younger fans. I thought the splash would be a lot better, but these are OGs. I respect their opinion. How about you, Pato? What did you think?
Well, if you're looking for a bit of enthusiasm, you'll probably get it from me because I've actually watched every season of The Ultimate Fighter. I like the show. It's one of the things that drew me to watching the sport outside of obviously Anderson Silva and Uriah Faber were the two guys. But it's Ultimate Fighter, especially season one, was a big part of it. Now, of course, the format is the same, and I think people will tune in depending on who's coaching. Conor is this year, so it's definitely going to bring a lot more eyes. But I think the entertainment value also depends on the fights themselves, the contestants. Episode ones are always slow. If you go back to the majority of the seasons, the first episode, because it's a bit of an introduction season, we hear kind of the similar speech from Dana White to all the contestants, and it's kind of explaining how the show works and stuff like that. For people who have watched most seasons or a lot of seasons, they don't really want to hear that because we already know. But for people who are tuning in for the first time, it's information they kind of have to relay. But again, it depends on, like, on the show, if you're going to get certain characters, a Junie Browning or whatever. It's a reality TV show at the end of the day, so that's what people are looking for. And I think sometimes you get some dry characters, great fighters, but dry characters, and you won't get the entertainment you're looking for. But in terms of this season, it's just the first episode. First episodes are always slow, so I think it's a bit too early to judge what this season is going to look like.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I do think, just if I can cut in real quick, I do think it's interesting. Danny said there that he thought, there wasn't as much build and stuff. This is probably as much build in terms of an in-fight episode leading up to the fight as you're going to get. The fight lasted, what, nine seconds or something like that? So, they gave you a long runway. And that's one of the bones I've kind of picked with the Ultimate Fighter over the years. Like, I was watching through it, and I was like, there's like 4 minutes left on this runtime. Are they even going to get a fight in there? It's going to be a quick fight when they start the fight with 25 minutes left. You're like, oh, this is probably going to be a decision. So there's not much they can do about that with the 1 hour format. But in terms of like an in-fight build and a slow build leading up to the fight, this is probably as bad as it's going to get just because the fight was so short. I can't reckon there's going to be something shorter than 9 seconds for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I'll be tracking it, and I'll see if I can get my hands on some ratings, because I just thought, man, McGregor's return and on ESPN and forecasting that fight, which everybody thinks is going to be a firecracker. If it goes down, we'll talk about that in just a second. I thought there would be, I don't know, man, more fanfare. But, hey, it's still a long season. We'll see how this breaks down. McGregor, though, man, he showed up like he's been partying or something. I think he could have showed up with my face. He would have looked better. He's tired looking, worn looking.
Didn't show up to the weigh-in.
Hold that yacht in from Monaco recently or something. All right. Now, focusing only on the biggest star in our sport, McGregor did his rounds of media to support the show. McGregor said he's aiming to make, quote, the greatest return in combat sports. But let's start off with the UFC president's comments on this topic. He's not making it sound like this is necessarily a slam dunk.
First of all, Conor called me a couple days ago and loved the first episode of The Ultimate Fighter and saying how happy he was that he was a part of it. And I think being here in the environment and everything else, he felt it again and felt like he wants to get back and fight. The one thing that you guys have to understand is this kid has so much money. It's like Khabib now. It's like these guys got shitloads of money, and it's hard to, reel these guys back in and get them fired up to get in a fight.
Now, I'm sure the three of you have seen, the interviews that McGregor's done, and now you've heard from White. After hearing all this, that proverbial stock, that McGregor stock that we always like to joke about, is it hot? Is it cold? Guys, are you buying or are you selling at this point? We're going to go to Danny first.
I'm selling. I mean, things are not looking good, right? Like, we'll see in a year, maybe more, but as of now, one fighter looks like they're training for a fight, the other doesn't. Obviously, Michael Chandler, just scroll past his Instagram, he's at the gym. Conor McGregor is watching the F1 race in Monaco, right? I believe. And even just stuff prior, like, he just seems to be partying and enjoying his life, which, again, I'm not going to criticize him for it, but if your intention is to come back, those activities probably don't align with your purpose. So, you see that, then you kind of, see some interviews with Michael Chandler where, he's kind of saying, oh, if he doesn't fight me, this is going to stain his legacy, kind of like putting a threat on him or putting pressure to get a deal done. We still don't know when they're going to fight. Then you hear those comments from Dana White. I'm not sure he's going to come back. I really don't. And I think Dana White on this occasion with those comments, he's on point about it. I mean, we saw what happened to McGregor the last time he stepped in the cage where he literally snapped his leg in half. I mean, and he said it in a tweet, months after where, pulling himself out of the USADA pool to do whatever he needed to do so he can not even just make a return, but be able to run around with his kids in the future and whatnot. Every time you step in there, you could lose an eye. A lot of things can happen, right? Even death, right? Like that's always in the cards as well. This is a dangerous sport and he has so much to lose. He's got a family, he's got health, he's got wealth, famous. I mean, in a way, it doesn't make sense for him to return, right? Unless it's just for his own pleasure, for his own purpose, right? So, yeah, we'll see if he comes back or not. But part of me is very skeptical that he will even make a return, given everything that I mentioned.
All right, we'll probably come back to you, Danny, because I got some follow-ups. Fada, how about you? McGregor stock, you buying or selling?
It's tough because the whole thing comes down to, for me right now, is USADA, right? Like, why isn't he re-entering the testing pool? That's the thing that people want to hear. That's the thing when people hear, whether he gets an exemption or not, we just want to hear that he's back in the USADA testing pool because he needs to do that regardless. And we haven't heard that yet. I think that's the biggest problem here. And in terms of McGregor, and he mentioned something, about having the greatest comeback in the history, I think him competing and just looking good would be a comeback. Obviously, if he wins, that in itself for him will be a massive win. Even if people think, oh, Michael Chandler is perfectly tailored for him stylistically, blah, 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 blah. The fact is that a lot of people still want to fight him. He's still being called out by all the champions. They could easily build up a fight with him and anyone. People are acknowledging that he could leapfrog, even Beneil Dariush when I spoke to him recently. So I think for Conor, just fighting Michael Chandler would make it one of the greatest comebacks because we've seen this type of injury and what it's done to people. Anderson Silva is a huge example. Chris Weidman isn't back yet. So coming back from an injury like that is hard in itself. I just need to see him back in the USADA testing pool for me to believe, okay, we're one step closer. When the fight happens, I don't think McGregor really cares. I know Michael Chandler really wants that fight, but he seems like he's willing to wait. For McGregor, whether, yes, we've got November and December, we've got MSG, and we've got Vegas is supposed to be T-Mobile Arena. But for Conor, does it really matter? November, December, January? I mean, the UFC want him back as soon as possible, sure. But I think we just need to see him back in the testing pool before I could, decide whether we're going to see him back or not. I just don't know what's taking so long.
Yeah, and to top it off, McGregor even told Oliveira he wants 3 or 4 fights. It's so confusing. The chat room's blowing up. They're discussing why isn't there a date. Some are saying that they're going to announce it during the show. They're teasing you. They're bringing you along. But still, in the past, we kind of had an idea by now. And you're right, Fada, that USADA deal, we got to know that first. All right, Mike Bond, weigh in, please.
There's a lot to unpack here, obviously. The whole thing, I think Farah nailed USADA stuff. Like, that is the first step that we need to go forward. They put out that statement, almost over 2 weeks ago at this point, saying that his re-entry was imminent and they had conversations with him about filing paperwork. And here we are, beginning of June, still nothing showing up in the database as far as him, getting tests or being in there and stuff. So that's a red flag. This quote that we're working this topic around, the greatest comeback in combat sports, you got to keep in mind that interview with Conor and Megan Olivier was recorded, I believe, right when he got to the Apex and started filming The Ultimate Fighter. So that is quite dated at this point, and he's been through, whatever he's been through since then. I think we just got to keep it real here, right? Like, obviously, anyone who has been tracking Conor McGregor's behavior closely enough through interviews on social media and beyond in recent years, there's some level of skepticism in your mind if he's going to come back and fight again, right? Like, you don't know for sure. He can say that he is as mentally in the game as he's ever been and that he's still passionate about the sport. And I do believe that to a degree, but it is one thing to say all that. It's an entirely different challenge to go through the obstacles he needs to go through. You saw it at a training camp. I don't know if any of you guys watched that documentary you put out on Netflix. It recapped 3 fights, I believe, throughout his career, and some of the most recent ones. And he had a really tough time getting through training camp for every single one of those. So he turns 35 5 next month, I believe, July 14th or something. So like there's a lot of things here that you can raise an eyebrow to and be like, is this thing really going to happen? I want to happen. I think when Conor McGregor is wanting to fight and mentally checked in, it's for the betterment of all of us, for the betterment of the sport, the industry. He raises the tide for, all the boats and stuff like that. And it's a good thing. But right now, you just have to show us something, right? Like right now, all he's showing us is just tweets that are, you can read into them however you want to. He's doing some interviews and stuff, but we haven't seen the real action that we need to see from him as far as a UFC comeback. And I think that is what, relates to Dana White's comments, which I think we'll get a little more into. I mean, I was sitting there listening to him on Saturday night speak about Conor, and it was like, he's talking about this guy as if he's a thing of the past at this point, saying, we can find new stars and we're, looking forward. There's plenty of people who want to be Conor McGregor in this company. That doesn't sound like a promoter who's confident he is coming back in the immediate future. So right now, like I can't sit here with any degree of confidence saying that he's going to fight again.
Mike, as you were talking, I summoned cold coffee and this future award-winning video guy. I'm telling you, he comes through. We got that quote for you. This is Dana White at the post-fight press conference for UFC on Vegas 46.
I never get concerned. You know what I mean? Listen, when guys show, we have a massive roster of people that want to come in and people that are ready to fight and people that want to be Conor McGregor, and be at that level. It's like for the last 20 years, everybody said, oh my God, what are you guys going to do when Chuck Liddell retires? You guys are fucked. Oh my God, GSP, Anderson Silva, this and that. This is a professional sport. People come in here, they achieve great things, and they retire. You know what I mean? You can never worry about that type of stuff. It is what it is. It's part of the game. It's my job and my team's job to find new talent and build them and take them to that level.
Ooh, yeah. That does seem like maybe we're getting prepped for something. All right.
John Morgan asked him 3 times, pretty much point blank, our former colleague, like, are you concerned? What's the status of this fight? And he completely danced around it. So, I mean, I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to kind of read into that. I think maybe some of the concerns are seeping into Dana and the UFC's minds as well.
All right. So let me ask you guys this. This is a fill in the blank. Remember those back in the day? Again, we'll go Danny fought on Mike. Guys, if Conor McGregor never fought in the UFC again, I would feel fill in the blank. Danny?
Bit disappointed, to be honest. If you just go back, and for those fans that started watching MMA and the UFC post-pandemic, if you just go back to that time that he became a double champion and defeated Eddie Alvarez, Conor McGregor was one of the world's best at that point in time. I mean, what he was doing was just brutal, was just, it almost had a feeling the same as Anderson Silva when he was in his prime, where you go, there's no way he can pull this off. And he would do it in a way that just kind of felt special, felt magical, right? And that over the years, especially after the Eddie Alvarez fight, and after he started making a bunch of money, began to fade away to the point that, a lot of people make fun of Conor McGregor and kind of poke at him and kind of sometimes even treat him as a meme. But people forget this dude was a serious talent, one of the best fighters I've ever seen when, 100% on. So part of me would be disappointed because, yes, I know he's had, some injuries and whatnot. But I do feel like at least on this stage of his career, he's kind of underperformed. And if he were to retire, I would feel like it'd be a premature retirement. Again, I wouldn't blame him for it because of the things that I mentioned, minutes ago. But still, I just feel like he could have gone so much farther if maybe, certain distractions and money, frankly, probably didn't take his focus away from fighting.
Yeah. Chat room, you can chime in as well. Nelly Morris is saying he or she would feel robbed. Fada, how would you feel if Conor McGregor, if Conor McGregor never fought in the UFC again, I would feel, go ahead.
Yeah, robbed's not a bad word. I mean, robbed or just weird, because it seems like we've been gearing for his return, the Netflix documentary, The Ultimate Fighter, all these things that are building towards Conor's greatest comeback. He's coming off of the injury and stuff like that. So it would feel weird that after all of that, like kind of anticlimactic, I should say, that after all that, we just don't even see him fight. So it would be weird, especially that we're building towards it. He is the sport's biggest star. It's any time we lose a star that's that big. Obviously, McGregor's the biggest of them all. It's kind of sad as well. And I know he talks about his motivation to fight, and it's not for the money. Obviously, he doesn't need the money. But it just seems like we've been building, because sometimes when fighters are hurt or we haven't seen them or suspended or whatever, there isn't that big buzz or people aren't talking about it. Now, of course, Conor does a great job by tweeting and all the time and commenting and beefing with certain fighters. But it's also like, just as I mentioned before, the Netflix documentary, The Ultimate Fighter, it's just, it would be weird to not see him compete after all of this.
Mm-hmm. All right, Mike, let's go to you. If Conor McGregor never fought in the UFC again, I would feel.
Yeah, I think it's unfulfilled is the word, right? And I think that's just a twist on what Danny and Farah both said there. I don't have a ton much more to add, right? Like, it's either going to happen or it's not. Danny laid it out. He was extraordinary in those years from like 2014 to 2016. And then, the Floyd Mayweather fight happened and he won, right? He won the game. He got an enormous payday. He was a 2-division champion. He did everything you could do, reached heights higher than many people in the sport could ever dream of achieving. So like, no one is going to sit here and say that, like disrespect him in that regard. He changed the game for all of us, for this entire industry. But this back half, these recent years, it's kind of spoke for itself, right? Like, not much competition. The times he has fought, it's been some rough outings, mostly losses. Only one win in this decade, and that was against Donald Cerrone in a very quick fight, and he was coming off a losing skid, multiple losses and stuff. So I don't think this back half of the career in these recent years really are a depiction of Conor McGregor's best. And I'm sure he's dreaming that, there's better stuff coming on the horizon and he can get back to form and stuff. But there is a lot of obstacles in his way from a health perspective, from a competition perspective. Michael Chandler is not a layup fight for him by any stretch of the imagination if they do get in there. As we kind of said earlier, right? Like, he is working his ass off every day. You see it in the gym against absolute killers in one of the best training camps in the entire world. And Conor McGregor, is shadow boxing on his yacht and stuff like that. So it's an uphill climb for him at this point, but we'll see what happens going forward. As I said earlier, for the betterment of our industry, like, I hope he does fight. It's a good time when Conor McGregor is acting and it's for the best, but yeah, I just don't know if it's going to happen.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, I would fill it in with the word sad. And the reason is because I always say this sport, there's a good chance it's going to chew you up and spit you out. But usually I mean that in the way physically. A lot of people don't leave with all their brain cells, we'll say. Just sometimes you leave off a losing streak, demoralized. And Conor's different, right? Because he made a lot of money. And that's what we hope, that these fighters can maybe make the most of those years and then live in happiness. But I think this thing has chewed him up. The sport has chewed him up and spit him out, just kind of almost from the spiritual side, mental side, because he didn't get a chance to perform at his peak years. He had the money, he had the resources, but one way or another, this sport can get to you in many ways. Guys, let me ask you this. I want to touch on this topic a little bit more. The UFC, Dana White saying sometimes it's tough to reel in. We'll go Mike this time first. Mike, but isn't that part of the process? When you're talking to the two coaches, it's well understood you're gonna fight at the end. Maybe we don't have the date on the calendar. We can throw a dart at that later or whatever, but it's understood you're gonna fight. And he's got a contract, and if we have to, add a zero, take away a zero or whatever and figure it out, we'll figure it out. I don't understand why he's saying reeling him in. Do you think that's just a cover-up for this injury that's just way more serious, what we've been talking about here? Or is there a money issue, which I would find to be almost ridiculous at that point? You would think they would have cemented that when they brought him in.
I would be surprised if it was the money side. As far as, I've heard from recent fights and Conor fighting, like, they've been able to reach financial terms without too many hurdles here. I think it's just, part of the fault goes on the UFC. They started this process and booked it when Conor wasn't in the USADA pool, hoping that he would do that, but knowing that it was going to be a 6-month wait. They can give him the exemption, right? Like, they could do that tomorrow and they could book this fight next month if they wanted to. That would come with a lot of negative criticism and all that kind of stuff from people like us sitting here on these shows. But if the UFC wants to do it and deals with the backlash, they can. But if they want the proper process for this fight, the USADA thing has to come first, right? And they are basically at the whim of Conor at this point. Like if he jumps in right now, he could headline Madison Square Garden sometime the next week, like in November. He has a month or 6 weeks to get in there for the final pay-per-view of the year. But like right now, it's just a waiting game on Conor. Like Michael Chandler's ready to go. The UFC is ready to go. The Ultimate Fighter is airing. So like they're at the mercy of him at this point. And I can imagine there's some frustration going as they try to lay out the back half of this year in those UFC offices and that war room Dana always likes to talk about. Like they want to know what the deal is, but they can't do it.
I'm thinking that exemption might come into play, and it's gonna bite Dana White in the ass, because a few months ago when he was asked, he goes, I don't want to talk about it. That's Jeff Nowitzki, USADA, whatever. We're going to throw it back to USADA. And then USADA came back over the top, a poker term, and said, this is the way we want it. 6 months worth of testing before he can come back. Now, can they go back on their word? Of course they can. It's the Muppet Show over there many times, and they do go back on what they say. But regardless, Prada, what do you think? Did the UFC maybe cover up for Conor here a little bit, or do you think it could be maybe a money issue?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a money issue. I think the UFC are just kind of frustrated at this point. They probably want to close out the year strong. They don't know what's going on with Jon Jones and the Stipe fight, and I know we're going to go into that topic later. And now Conor, we don't know if he's going to come back by the end of the year or not. So I think it's just Dana making that comment. It's like they just kind of want to know how this year is going to end. And two of their biggest stars at the moment in the UFC, we don't know. Like we know kind of who they're going to fight, but it's like they can't settle down on a date and make things official. So I think it's just a little, like what Mike said, a little bit of frustration, but I don't think it's a money thing. It's just, we want to know when Conor's going to be ready to go. And it looks like the fight's going to take place at 170. Conor looks huge. We don't know if he's training. How long does Conor McGregor want? There's just a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm. Danny, any final thoughts on this topic of McGregor, his return, everything that we've discussed?
Yeah, just want to point out, in both Mike and Farah mentioned this, but I really don't think it's a money thing, right? Like Jon Jones had a money issue with the UFC, but you could see him, hitting the weight room, bulking up, being at the gym, training, and, just staying ready. But he just wanted to work the terms out with the UFC. McGregor's out there partying with Proper 12 and having the time of his life. Again, it's not a money thing. It's more like a lifestyle thing. Like, are you willing to give up the lifestyle you have in order to go into the lifestyle of an MMA fighter and be able to, be fit enough to fight, Michael Chandler and be able to pass all these USADA tests and whatnot? That is the real question, right? And is money really an incentive at this point with all the businesses that he has? And I think he passed over like $500 million in his fortune. I think that was recently on Forbes and whatnot. So usually this is prize fighting, right? Like the price is what drives the motivation. But at this point, McGregor has so much money that it's a different type of motivation. It's a motivation to further a legacy. It's a motivation personally, all these other factors that just don't seem to be there at the moment. So we'll see. Again, I hope that he comes back. Like Mike said, it just makes the sport a lot more exciting. It makes it a lot bigger. It's just great having him around. But frankly, like just doesn't really, at this point in time, doesn't look very realistic. We'll see. Maybe 6 months from now, maybe things will change. I don't know.
6 months from now, he can still fight in Vegas. But the longer he waits, 2023 is kind of slowly going out the window. I will say this. I brought it up before. He mentioned to Megan O'Leary, $650 million was his fortune. But they talked about that Forbes list, and that Forbes list goes January to December. I could see him maybe postponing it, getting an early start on 2024, which I think is what he wanted to do when he came back against the Diamond before he lost that fight, and rack up a bunch of wins, because he really got excited. Man, talking about money gets that guy's juices flowing. John R. has a different take here in the chat room. He says, having kids makes even the most savage people grow up and chill out, but he will fight again in the UFC. I am certain 2024, you will see one more run. John R. needs to learn the purpose of a period, by the way, and commas, but that's his comment. I think so. He looks great with his kids in the documentary. He really does look like he's close to them, but I think that savage is still there. All right, we're going to move on here. The next topic is, yes, Jon Jones' next possible opponent. Let's talk about Jon Jones versus Tyson Fury in the UFC. What? I know the panel can't wait to chime in here, but let's hear from the UFC president himself first. These are some comments from that post-fight press conference he did, UFC on ESPN 46, Kara France versus Al-Bazzi.
I like Tyson Fury. I have a great relationship with Tyson Fury. So there's this debate right now about the baddest man on the planet, right? And Jon Jones is the baddest man on the planet. There's no doubt about it. So when you talk about who the baddest man on the planet is, if two guys fought in a fight, who would win? If you want to discuss another possible baddest man on the planet, it would be Tyson Fury, okay, in a boxing arena. And we all know that if Jon Jones boxed Tyson Fury wins. All these boxing guys want to talk about this, and they want to keep it in the ring. I'm telling Tyson Fury, whom I respect very much, if you really want to find out who the baddest man on the planet is, I will make that fight. I will make Jon Jones versus Tyson Fury in the octagon. And, we'll figure out. We figured out how to pay Floyd. We'll figure out how to pay you too, Tyson.
There is a lot there. Oh, boy. All right, Fada, we're going to go to you first. What did you think of this latest proposal to have Fury come to the octagon and fight Jones to settle who, in fact, is the baddest man on the planet?
Am I surprised that Dana's making this proposition? No, because I think there are a few UFC fighters that are big enough stars to do this crossover. And now with Jon Jones back, becoming heavyweight champion, running through Cyril Gane the way he did, it's a perfect time to market him as the baddest man on the planet. Now, of course, Francis Ngannou just left the UFC, so it's understandable. And he's gunning for the Tyson Fury fight, but he's looking to box Tyson Fury more than he is looking to do MMA. Now, Tyson Fury said he's not interested in doing MMA. He's responding to Francis Ngannou about the boxing match. And then Dana just openly said that Tyson would beat Jon Jones in a boxing match. Not that obviously I disagree with that, but as a promoter, to hear him say that and him pushing towards the MMA fight, I don't know. I mean, it's not something that, considering that Jon Jones is known for being very well-rounded, but known for his grappling as well. Why would we want to see that fight? But am I surprised that Dana White has come out and said that? No, because now Francis just left the UFC. He's talking about fighting Tyson. Tyson has shown a little bit of interest in MMA in the past, but he just openly said he doesn't want to fight in a cage. So it goes back to what I said before. It's because Jon Jones right now is one of the biggest, not right now, has always been one of the biggest stars in the UFC, but the fact that he's back right now and a lot of attention's on him, it doesn't surprise me that he's trying to make this fight, but I don't know how I feel about it or if I even think it would happen.
Fury was very clear. He said, I'm a cage fighter, mate, when he was responding to where this fight would take place. And he told Rogan in the ring, let's do it. Mike, let's come to you, but I got to ask you a question. If you had a filing cabinet next to you, under G, where you got gimmick fights, wouldn't this fall under gimmick fights? And isn't that what the UFC doesn't do?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously a way to spin it. Of course, very contradictory to Dana White's comments that he made just a couple weeks ago, saying what you just referenced there. They don't do gimmick fights here. I mean, yeah, of course it is a gimmick fight in a way, but it's also like if they could make it happen, that would be extraordinary, right? Like if you had Jon Jones versus Tyson Fury in a UFC fight, like it's not like Tyson Fury is some bum or anything. Like, of course, we know what he's accomplished in the world of boxing. So that would be a huge mega event for the UFC. And I don't necessarily know if it would be a gimmick because there would be intrigue there, right? Like if if Tyson Fury could make something happen as far as like getting Jon Jones on the feet, that would be obviously quite fascinating, but you would have to suspect Jon Jones would be a gigantic favorite and would take him to the ground and demolish him very quickly. And if he lost that fight, it would probably be a bigger embarrassment to MMA than Ray Mercer knocking out Tim Sylvia in a matter of seconds, years and years ago, if people remember that. But that was kind of an anomaly at that point. So I don't know. I mean, like, we'll get further into that, but I guess to answer your question, I'm torn on whether like this would actually truly be a gimmick fight. I think it would be quite fascinating if it actually happened, but we'll talk more, I guess, now about whether it actually can.
Yeah, and Danny, I don't want to speak on your behalf. I'm sure you rolled your eyes, and then I mean, how do you react to this, or was it just a big waste of time?
I mean, there's so many aspects about this. First of all, like we found a way to pay Floyd Mayweather. I'm pretty sure that was a McGregor Promotions, Mayweather Promotions, and Showtime. Yes, the pay-per-view was also available on UFC.tv or whatever, but it wasn't a UFC production. Showtime produced the docu-series leading up to the event. It wasn't UFC announcers. It wasn't in a UFC cage. It wasn't with UFC production. That was not a UFC event. Let's just be very clear about that. So I don't know where he gets his comments. Like, we found a way to pay Floyd. No, you were in along for the ride. But anyways, this is just so puzzling. I would bet my life that a boxing match between Francis Ngannou and Anthony Joshua is far more competitive than an MMA fight between Tyson Fury and Jon Jones. So when you say the whole thing where we don't make gimmick fights here, that might be the biggest gimmick fight of them all if we're talking about the heavyweights. So yeah, it's just kind of puzzling. But again, I see why the UFC and Dana White would want to make that fight. It would obviously do blockbuster numbers, and it would raise Jon Jones and UFC's profile, because there's no chance in hell that Tyson Fury would win that fight. I mean, maybe like a 0.000000001% chance. But anyways, you guys understand. Just puzzling comments from, again, Dana White contradicting himself from literally previous comments done a week prior or a couple weeks prior.
Are there any pros and cons to this that you guys can think of that we haven't covered? I'll go back to Fada on this one.
Pros and cons of the fight happening?
Yeah, I mean, is there anything to get excited? I mean, I guess we find out who the baddest man on the planet is. And even if Jones or Fury gets their hand raised, Ngannou's still around, I mean, just 3 months ago, everybody said it's that guy.
Look, we're going to watch. That's just the reality of it. Just because when you put things like that, it's the same thing that people said when McGregor boxed Floyd, like he's going to get destroyed, blah, blah, blah. We're going to watch. So that part is going to happen. Are we going to necessarily enjoy it? Are we going to say, I told you so? But if I go to the comment section here, Richie Elger said, they know the algorithm. If they talk Jones versus Tyson Fury for a couple of weeks, everyone stops talking about Francis. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? Because right now you've got a 3-man race, not really, but in terms of the headlines, Francis, Tyson Fury, and Jon Jones, everyone talking about baddest man on the planet. We're talking boxing, we're talking about MMA, and then Tyson Fury's in the middle of it because obviously he's a boxing world champion and a huge star. So I think it's more noise than it is anything.
Also, I wanna chime in here. It is also taking away from the conversation of Ngannou joining the PFL, but also there's a subtle message there when it's like, well, the baddest man on the planet is between Tyson and Jon Jones. Like, we got to figure it out, right? Yeah. Well, Francis Ngannou has a claim to that as well, right? And until either Francis Ngannou or Jon Jones loses, that's the conversation of the baddest man on the planet, or until they fight, obviously. So yes, it's to distract a lot of the Ngannou PFL talk, but also in a way subtle there, get in there like, it's between Fury and Jon Jones. Like, Ngannou's not even in the conversation, right?
Yeah, and Mike, I want you to close up shop here, but earlier in the comments, somebody said, man, why are you guys all so mad and hating? And I don't know. I don't want to erupt here on a live show, so I'll let you handle it. You're definitely more poised than I am. But I'm just thinking, isn't it easier for PFL, who Dana White says, I have no ill will towards them, who's on ESPN just like them, so now we don't have to hear, opposing television or anything like that. Wouldn't it just be easier to bring that guy over and do that co-promotion, since they're so interested in co-promotion, than possibly trying to work with boxing, who he said many times it's almost impossible to work with boxing. And I believe Bob Arum is an advisor to Tyson Fury, maybe not necessarily his promoter. It just seems to get really difficult, in my opinion, to even start to think about making that matchup. But you take it from here before I erupt.
Yeah, so Dana was kind of asked that question at the back end of the scrum about like the promoter side of Tyson Fury and how it would work, and he seemed to have some level of confidence that, given his relationship with Tyson specifically and whatever inside knowledge he may know about his promotional contracts and management and all that kind of stuff, he seemed confident that maybe there is a realistic path to getting this done. But I think what Danny said there, and Farah alluded to as well, is like pretty on point, right? In terms of trying to take the attention away from Francis and maybe take this fight away from him as a whole, right? Because if Francis Ngannou gets this fight with Tyson Fury, the conversation is over. He won this decision to leave the UFC. He got the big boxing fight he wanted. You assume the big payday that comes with it. He got the MMA deal that seems pretty damn fantastic for him as well. Like, what up then, haters, right? Like, you can't say anything negative about this guy. He absolutely hit a home run with this decision to leave. And I'm sure Dana doesn't want that egg on his face, right? Like, he doesn't want the UFC looking bad in this situation, which is understandable. So, like, he's doing his job. He's doing what he probably thinks is in the best interest in the UFC. So I can't necessarily hate on him for it, right? Like, he's doing what he has to do. Francis made his decision to leave, and here we are, right? Like, they're kind of now jockeying over this. Yes, you know, as you kind of started off your question with George, right? Like, it seems like we're hating on Dana or trying to nitpick his words. Like, this is the job. This is the point of the show. This is why you're watching it. So people like us who with inside knowledge and been covering this industry for so long can talk about these topics and tell you, the viewer, when things are misrepresented or inaccurately presented by Dana White. You know, like, he's going to go up there and he's going to say what he say, but not everything is coming from a complete point of truth or a complete point of honesty. So that's just the reality of the situation. It's not us hating. It's just us doing our job and, you know, making the show come together the way it's supposed to be. So I don't really know what more to say about that. Like, we'll see if this is actually realistic and has legs to it. But when Dana came out and said that unprompted at the press conference, that was kind of the first feeling that hit my gut. Is like, maybe there is some real traction right now to Francis Ngannou versus Tyson Fury. Even today, I think Tyson Fury just like posted on his Instagram story a few hours ago, like, I would knock Francis Ngannou out after drinking 15 pints or something like that. And then Francis responded, if you're following the boxing world, it seems like Tyson Fury is maybe having a little difficulty locking down one of these fights against like Usyk or whoever it may be. So maybe this is the time for Francis to happen. Dana White sees this opportunity and he wants to cut in and try to insert Jon Jones into the conversation, make that fight happen for them. Will Tyson Fury even consider doing an MMA fight? Who knows? It would have to be a pretty damn big bag, I think. Something that's maybe well beyond the scope of our imagination. Then there's the other side of getting Jon Jones, his terms and his contract signed up for something of that magnitude. There's a lot of pieces here in motion, but you can bet your ass that Dana White didn't bring that up unprompted at the press conference for no reason. There's something going on here.
Good point and well put. All right. We can always circle back according to the comments that come in. So please come in with comments, questions. I'll get to some. Big Ben 316 is a Danny Segura fan. He says Danny Segura is the man. And Danny, I believe Big Ben Rothwell actually was giving you some shout outs on Twitter the other day as him being one of the people that can possibly fight Francis Ngannou. That was an excellent article. I think you laid out 5 names. Big Ben, formerly of the UFC, and now with Bare Knuckle, was one of your choices that possibly made sense. That's good stuff. All right. Let's move on to the next one here. Let's talk UFC on ESPN 46. Kai Kara-France versus Amir Albazi. Look, I'm not going to say they went to war, but it was a solid fight, an important one for the flyweight division. There's a saying, quote, may the best man win, unquote. According to MMA decisions, KKF got the nod overall over there, 19-2, according to the pundits there. Now, 2 of them had it 48-47 for Albazi, 9 had it 48-47 for Kara-France, and 10 had it 49-46 for Kara-France. That's kind of how I had it, 48-47, with the possibility of even a 49-46 Kara-France. So let's hear, guys, your score and reaction to the decision. Back to Toronto, the MMA media titan, Mike Vaughn.
I thought Kai Kara-France won. I thought he had round 1, 4, and 5. It was close though, right? Like watching these fights, especially flyweights, right? Like there's the action in there is happening insanely quick. There's some strikes you don't even see land, things like that. I can't imagine the difficulty of watching that in real time as a judge without the benefit of replays and slow motion and stuff. You got one shot to analyze it, then you got to hand in your scorecard seconds after the round concludes. So I think people also need to take into account that portion of the reality of judging fights. It's not easy, especially these flyweights that are insanely quick, but I do think the decision was wrong. I thought Kara-France won clearly enough 3 of these rounds. I'm not going to sit here and scream robbery. I've said this, too many times to count on the show. Close fights are not always robberies. We're talking about a difference of 1 close round here, right? Like, it feels like looking back, round 1 was probably the swing round here and how people scored it each way. So, like, you're telling me that 1 round, the opening round, that was close, defines it as a robbery? That's just not the reality. It was a close fight, maybe the wrong decision, but I think, they did get it wrong here, but it was close, man. So I can't really sit here screaming from the high heavens if they weren't able to do more definitive to create more separation on the scorecards.
This is a tough one because Goes and I also rewatched it, and those rounds were close, but at the same time, right now robbery is going to get thrown out, and that also gets on my nerves. But 19-2 on MMA decision, so it's like we all kind of slanted a certain way. I'll let the other 2 chime in. I don't want to speak on their behalf, but it's a lot of people slanted one way, but the rounds were close. So as much as you want to say robbery, you really can't. But anyway, back to Danny.
Yeah, see, I have a very similar take to Mike's, but not entirely. I do agree it was not a robbery. I am actually okay with 48-47 for either guy. I scored it for Kai Kara-France. My scorecard, I don't know if Kenny can put here the official scorecards. I don't know if that's in handy, but I had it like Mike Bell, which was 10-9 first round for Kai Kara-France, second and third 10-9 for Amir Al-Bassi, and then fourth and fifth 10-9 for Kai Kara-France, giving me a 48-47. I do think rounds 2 and 3 were clear for Amir, and I do think rounds 4 and 5 were clear for Kai Kara-France. It was that first round that it came down to. So I agree with Mike Bell. Sal D'Amato had it that way, but in the first round, he had it 10-9 for Amir Al-Bassi. That's why he goes 48-47 with Amir, and that's completely fine. Where I have an issue is Chris Lee. He gave the 4th round to Amir Al-Bassi. So first round to Kai Kara-France, 2, 3, and 4 to Amir, and then 5th to Kai Kara-France. I don't know how you can score that 4th round for Amir Al-Bassi, and I think that's where all the sort of rage and chaos and criticism on Twitter come from. Again, close fight. I don't hate the fact that Amir Al-Bassi got his hand raised. At the end of the day, we saw a pretty competitive fight, 2 very skilled guys, and you can't say Amir Al-Bassi is not top 5 quality. I mean, not only he went to a decision, but a very close decision with number 3, right? The problem is that 4th round. I do think that I don't know, Chris Lee has some accountability here to do, some answers to give. I don't know how the hell you score that 4th round for Amir Al-Bassi. So that's the only wrinkle that I'd like to add to this.
Okay, Fada, scorecard and reaction.
I agree with what a lot of what Danny said. I think you either look at this fight 1-2-3 Amir or 1-4-5 Kai Kara-France. So I think the issue with Chris Lee's scorecard, round 4, scoring it for Al-Bassi is the issue that I have here. I rewatch the fight. I always have to do that. I do pull all-nighters and I'm staying in the middle of the night. It's hard. I was actually surprised when I looked at the stats and Kai Kara-France had outlanded Amir by that much. I didn't necessarily feel it in the fight because Amir was the one pressing forward. And I think this is where the judges could sway towards Amir because he was the one pressing the action. I know he failed on a couple of takedowns. He did get him down in round 3. I think that was his round. He did come very close to choking him out. I saw Amir or his team kind of complaining about glove grabs. Angle was not clear for me to make any judgment because the way he had his arm under his neck, I couldn't see what I heard a warning from the ref, I think. But regardless, that round was his. I don't think the debate is too much on round 3. I think it comes down to round 1. It was very close. Are you looking at Amir pressing forward, pressing the action, or are you looking at a Kai Kara-France outlanding him? I know Kara-France outlanded him throughout the whole fight. Here's the scorecard being pulled up. So you've got one judge that gave I think it was Kai Kara-France, or 2 judges that gave him round 1 and 1 gave it to Amir. So yeah, the scorecards are all over the place. I think it depends, but it was very, very close. Rewatch that fight. I urge people to rewatch that fight before they get outraged. Like Mike said, it doesn't deserve that kind of outrage. When you rewatch the fight, you'll see, did Amir Al-Bassi slow down towards the fight? The end of the fight? Absolutely. And I think that visual is what helped a lot of people be outraged by the outcome, just because he was starting to get a little bit busted up around the nose area. He started to look like he was tiring out. towards the latter round. So I think that visual as well made people think, like, how did Kai Kara-France not win this fight? I think it's a lot closer than what people made it out to be.
Here's the weird thing too: rounds 1, 4, and 5, 2 judges scored it for Kai Kara-France. It's just the arithmetic works differently when you get a shutout like you did in rounds 2 and 3, where all the judges scored it for Amir Albazi. But let me ask you guys this: round 3, I did have sort of an issue. Okay, so Albazi is taking the rear naked choke. It's a little sloppy, but he's doing a nice job juggling the body triangles. He's got hooks in, right? He's trying to go in. Kai Kara-France is fighting. He does have one hand in there. He's reaching. He's trying to take the pressure off. But in the end, with about 40 seconds left, he manages to stand up, shake him off, and then he's on top. He throws some elbows. They look like they landed. You could hear some thumping, at least 4 or 5 of them. A couple follow-up punches. I'm not too concerned about those. But that damage, a lot of people thought, including myself, that might have been enough to maybe steal back the round. What did you guys feel about round 3? Real quick, please, Mike.
Yeah, it's just, that's one of the things, right? Like the scoring criteria is so open to interpretation and how you really feel about it, right? Like, what is the better thing? Yeah, I know we say damage is ultimately the number one criteria that they should lean towards, but like, the guy that choke was almost deep at one point. Like the commentators are being like, he's done, all that kind of stuff. I know they sometimes over exaggerate in that moments, but that was like a very compromising position. And yeah, maybe submission attempts don't come with the most damage, but like it's a couple elbows over a few seconds outweighing minutes of back control and submission attempts. Like this is the point where like the, I guess, vagueness of the scoring criteria comes into play and how one person may value something different. And that's where, as long as you have human error and actual people sitting in those chairs, like you're going to get this kind of stuff unless you want to overhaul the scoring criteria and make it much more definitively defined.
Mm-hmm. All right. Danny or Potter, did you want to weigh in? Did round 3, did you think Kai Kara-France maybe did enough at the end, or was it a clear Albazi round?
No, I think for me it was clear Albazi. I mean, you take the back, you control, and you threaten with a rear naked choke, which in my opinion looked pretty tight. I mean, Kai Kara-France really had a struggle with that one. Yeah. That to me was, I had no difficulty scoring it for Albazi.
Okay, Fada?
I thought that was the clearest round or easiest round to score, considering that the other rounds, when you look at them, these flyweights are so talented and they're good everywhere, and Kara-France showed good takedown defense throughout, and it was more of a volume versus aggression type of fight. And Amir Albazi landed some solid shots as well, but Kara-France outlanded him pretty big when you look at the stats. But yeah, I thought round 3 was the clearest to score.
All right, fair enough. I respect all 3 of you, so I'll have to go back and rewatch. Pie in my face for now. Let's move to the last topic here because we're running out of time. But this Saturday's UFC 289 pay-per-view is definitely top-heavy. We have a solid main and co-main event. And by the way, Goz and I will be hosting a watch-along on MMA Junkie, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Join us on Saturday to watch the fights together, along with each other. All right, I think the title fight speaks for itself. Will the GOAT add to her legacy, or can Mexico add a 4th world champion? It's going to be a good one. But in the co-main event, that's got some intrigue, a ton of twists. Is it and should it be a number 1 contender fight? The UFC saddles up to it as a possibility, but they won't confirm. Is this the Conor McGregor effect? He's always around, right? Or are we even seeing the possible weight of the upcoming BMF title fight rearing its head? All right, on this one, we are going to Danny Segura first.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It just seems so obvious even before this fight with Oliveira booked that Beneil Dariush is the clear number 1 contender. He's been for quite some time. And I don't really understand what's the hesitancy to put him in a fight. I mean, the guy is extremely talented. He's elite. He's got, sporting wise, a resume to back up a title shot. We just got to look at his resume as well. Fight of the night, knockout of the night. The guy's also a very, very exciting fighter. So I don't know why he can't just find himself in a title fight, but I don't know. The UFC has sort of been reluctant to double down on things and label things number 1 contender, this and that. I hope for his sake that he gets a championship fight from this. But yeah, the Conor McGregor effect is very, very active. I think mostly linked to 155. And then also the BMF title, right? Like, we don't know what kind of magic Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier are going to recreate in that rematch. I mean, it could be something that transcends the sports world, and, you know, the winner of that becomes, you know, an overnight star. I mean, they're already pretty popular figures, and that could dampen, you know, the chances of Benil Dariush of getting a title shot here. So I don't know. I just feel bad for Benny because, in my opinion, he's the clear number one contender.
Father, you recently spoke to Benny. I caught that interview. It's still on Junkie. If you scroll down, sorry, we put out a lot of content. Or you can go to youtube.com/MMA Junkie video, and you can get the whole interview there. Father, he clearly told you, like, he's not even worried about it. Kind of like, it is what it is. But, you know, you could just tell in his heart, man, this has to be it if he beats Oliveira.
Oh, 100%. And here's the problem. It's because Islam Makhachev was set on competing in Abu Dhabi, which caused all of this. Because technically, when Charles Oliveira withdrew from his fight against Benil Dariush, and Benil asked the UFC, he told them, like, I'll fight Islam in Abu Dhabi. If Islam was down to fight earlier, then they could have just made that fight. And then we could have seen what happened with the BMF, with Conor McGregor and stuff like that. But now, if Benil loses to Charles Oliveira, Oliveira just lost to Islam Makhachev quite dominantly. I think it's a hard sell to make him the next title challenger. And then I think it would be pretty obvious that it would go to the BMF title winner between Gaethje and Poirier, just because these guys are always impressive in what they do, and they're fresh faces for Islam Makhachev. So I think the issue for Benil and why this is all panning out the way it is because Islam wants Abu Dhabi, the UFC want Islam in Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi, obviously being in the Middle East, we don't have an Arab star that can headline. The second best thing it gets for us is obviously the Muslim fighters and the community they bring, the fans they bring, and that's why they like them. They're the Hamzats, the Islam Makhachevs, whoever else is going to be on that card, anyone from Team Habib. So I think the UFC thinking, you know, they like to give Abu Dhabi big pay-per-views. Islam is a no-brainer as a headliner. And then that's where the issue falls for Benil. Otherwise, he should have been next in line. We could have had that fight in International Fight Week. I do believe Islam, I guess, would have been ready by then. But they want him in Abu Dhabi, and that's why for Benil. But if Benil wins, yes, in my opinion, he should absolutely be next in line.
Mike Bond, the pressure's on. I want you to put your promoter hat on. You, please, since the UFC won't do it, guarantee that this is a number one title contender fight, especially if any Dariush wins.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty straightforward, right? This doesn't feel overly complicated. If Benil Dariush wins, he is getting the title shot. He said the UFC has essentially assured him as much. We'll get that in Abu Dhabi, where obviously, as Farah just laid out, Islam Makhachev will probably be headlining that event. I know he did want to fight earlier, but they need those Abu Dhabi cards to be absolutely big time. And that's who the shot callers and the UFC's business partners over there want on that card. So they're going to hold out fighters to be on that card. Why do you think Khamzat Chimaev is also sitting out? They want him on that card. They don't want to risk him getting injured or something happening before then that would put that in jeopardy. But to the question, yeah, Dariush wins. That's the fight we're getting. If Charles Oliveira wins, things get mixed up a little bit more. The doors open for the winner of Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje, but that fight late July, Abu Dhabi, early October or mid-October, that could be too much of a turnaround, especially, you know, Gaethje and Poirier are going to take someone from each other in that fight. It's not going to be an easy one. They're going to need a little time after that. So that's where things get a little complicated. You want me to put my promoter hat on here, George? I guess I'm putting on Dana White's hat because I have to say it's a product of timing, right? That's what it all comes down to. Dana says that time and time again. All these fights really depend on timing, health, circumstances, things like that. And that's going to be the situation here as far as who challenges Islam Makhachev. But Benil Dariush wins. This is a very straightforward conversation. I talked to Poirier last week. You can see that interview on this YouTube channel as well. He deferred the title shot to Dariush if he wins. He said there's no denying it. It's clear cut. I think we all agree. It would be a miscarriage of justice if he does not get that title shot. And Oliveira wins, though. It'll be an interesting conversation we're having here next week.
That was a great interview, folks. Catch it here on the YouTube channel. Go ahead, Fada.
Yeah, I just want to go back to a point I made to clarify. I was saying we don't have an Arab star to headline. Bilal would love to fight Leon Edwards, and I think that would be absolutely perfect. But it seems like the UFC want Leon Edwards and Colby Covington as Colby Covington as his next title challenger. So what I meant is someone primed to headline that event. It's not what I meant as in Bilal. You know, Bilal versus Leon would be a very
Put the torches down, haters.
Hey, one last thing here. I've already accepted next time I see Cold Coffee, he's going to grab me by the throat and choke slam me because we're going to go over about a minute. I need you guys to keep it nice and tight here. But Jim Miller, guys, Jim freaking Miller, we got to talk about him. A, is he a Hall of Famer? B, did he just cement his invite to UFC 300? Danny, go first. Quick, please.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to be on UFC 300, right? Like, that's amazing. And 25 wins. Congrats to Jim Miller. Longevity, I think it's something that's very underestimated in the sport. 25 fights, been in the UFC since the UFC pay-per-views were 2-digit numbers. I think he made his debut in like UFC 89 or something like that. So, yeah, crazy run. Congrats to Jim Miller.
Mike?
If you're going to put Donald Cerrone in the Hall of Fame, I guess you got to put Jim Miller at this point. Of course, the difference in resume, Cerrone did get a title shot. He got dusted in like a minute. Jim Miller never got that chance, but still, that is like a bit of a difference in resume. But everything Miller's done in terms of passing Cerrone on all of these record lists, and who knows where he's going to end up when this whole thing's done. The door is open and the criteria is there for someone of his career path to get in the UFC Hall of Fame.
Fada, you get the final take. I'm passing it to you.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who can break records in the UFC and hold these kind of statistics deserves a spot in the Hall of Fame. So, yes, and hopefully we see him in UFC 300.
Great stuff. My favorite panel. Don't tell the others I said that, but you three brought it. Cold Coffee did great. Please don't choke slam me too hard. And, of course, Abby Suhan with the graphics, keeping it nice and tight. The chat room blew up. I'm sorry I couldn't get to more of you. You guys had some good stuff there. Folks, we'll see you next week, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, for another edition of Spinning Back Clique. And don't forget about our UFC watch-along Saturday here on MMA Junkie.